This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by note.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the note and into hope.
Welcome back to the Hope Not Note podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are thrilled to be with you today, and I'm kind of excited about this question. It is from a listener named Dom, and he says, I was watching the Netflix docuseries Enigma with Aaron Rodgers, which we also have watched. And so Dom asks, what are your thoughts on the ayahuasca ceremonies for athletes? Ayahuasca? Ayahuasca? What is it?
Ayahuasca
ceremonies for athletes.
It's a mouthful to say.
Yeah, words are hard.
And I remember after watching it, you're talking and ask ashwagandha, ayahuasca.
Yeah.
What is which? What do they do? What
are they similar? Are they both mushrooms? Isn't ashwagandha a mushroom?
Ashwagandha is not a mushroom.
Oh.
Yeah, but they're both similar in the sense of like
they're from the earth.
They're from the earth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Potatoes?
But very different. Very different interactions with the human body.
Gotcha.
Ashwagandha is more one, it's a supplement and legal to take.
Oh.
And I'm pretty sure ashwagandha means like strong as a horse or something to do with a horse, because the whole thing behind it is that maybe ashwagandha can help you in strength efforts.
Oh.
There's some research in that. More needs to come out before that can be concluded. But ayahuasca, something completely different. Ayahuasca, it's a psychoactive beverage, meaning like it's drugs. It has drugs in it. I think the active drug in it is DMT, which makes it illegal in the US. Like the DMT is the psychoactive ingredient with it. So what is a ayahuasca ceremony? Do you want to explain it from what you learned from watching the docuseries?
Sure. So in the docuseries with Aaron Rodgers, for our listeners who may not have seen it, you can go to Netflix to watch it if you'd like. It's only like 3 parts, like 3 episodes.
Yeah.
They're like maybe an hour and a half each.
It's a fascinating watch.
It was really fascinating. Very fascinating. That's a great word.
Did not know that RFK Jr. wanted Aaron Rodgers to be his vice president.
If he would have been the president.
Sorry, I spoiled the episodes, but I was like, I learned that. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I didn't even know they were connected. So,
right.
Yeah. Fascinating. Anyways, so the ayahuasca ceremony, essentially, they go to Costa Rica, but I'm sure that there's other places that do it as well. But people get together and they drink this drink, and it's almost like a moment of beautiful camaraderie. And they're playing music and singing, and there's drums. It's like a drum circle, but they're high while doing it. But then it almost opens up this like dialogue because of what they're experiencing. And so it's a very inclusive experience for what they're experiencing in their brain, in their mind, in the world, and whatever. And so it's I don't know. I've never been drunk or high or under any sort of influence, so I really don't get it, but I get that like for them it's like it's not an experience, and it's not like this like addiction that's unhealthy or they're trying to escape. They might be trying to escape, but it's more of like this like experience to experience the world from a different point of view type thing.
Yeah. Very, very well done.
I was gonna say, would you explain it differently,
very
Dylan?
Well done. It's very much we'll just say like the South American culture that is using the substance of ayahuasca, this psychoactive beverage. It's very much a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
It's the same thing of like, looking at like the Rastafari. And them using marijuana to have the spiritual experience. Yeah. It's the same thing with ayahuasca, and the reason I wanted to bring up the ceremony behind it is it's not just drinking the beverage. There's this whole thing around it of how it happens, and the whole goal is for this to be a spiritual experience. And I think Westerners would say that they do it because it bridges the gap between who they are and who they're meant to be. It kind of decreases the world distractions, allows them to get inside with their spiritual self to rediscover what's important to them. That's why Aaron Rodgers went on this was a way to kind of figure out who he was, because he wins the Super Bowl. He's an MVP. All of a sudden, he has paparazzi following him around. All of a sudden, he's a superstar. And I won't get into the beginnings of Aaron Rodgers, of like where he came from and like how hard he had to work to get there. But you know, it was a new stage for him to be on that he had not been used to. And in that, you know, he wins the Super Bowl. He's at the top of the world in the athletic realm. He's getting paparazzi, and he finds himself not fulfilled. Finds himself like struggling with like who am I? And if this goes away, who am I? And like, well, how do I rediscover that with all these distractions? And for him, it was a the curiosity of ayahuasca. It's like when you're getting ready to cue up the next word, that you fail the word before that because you're like ayahuasca, curiosity, ayahuasca. So that's kind of what drove him to do it, and that's what's driving other athletes at that level to become curious about it and think about partaking in it, because they're going through similar things. They're not sure what their core values are. They're not sure who they are as a person. It's all been put into this activity, and then they reach the pinnacle, but they haven't discovered who they are yet. So then they need to use other things to help them with that, decrease the stress barriers, and tap into this spiritual experience.
I also felt like there were some people who they didn't like who they were. Yeah. And so they were trying to, it was almost as if they were looking for something to help change who they were in order to become someone new after this ceremony, which the question is like, what are your thoughts on it? We just described what it is as a whole, but what are your thoughts on it?
We were just beautifully setting the stage to then give our thoughts on it, because the last thing I wanted to do to set the stage fully is that there's drums, there's singing, there's like it's a no judgment zone, but like a true no judgment zone, because like people are high, so they're like not worried about what other people are thinking of them, so they're free. They're like in community, they're free, they're beating these tribal drums. You're generally around a fire. There's suffering that goes into it. There's a suffering of going into this thing that looks like a tent and having a fire in it. You're in Costa Rica inside of a tent with a fire in it, really hot, not allowed to drink anything, but you're in there suffering together, and then you get to go lay in water. So there's also this experience of suffering before having the drink and bringing on the quote unquote joy, which the quote unquote kind of starts to put my thoughts into this. So I'm going to give my thoughts from a lot of different angles, but one angle is that ayahuasca is, you know, used with people that have high levels of anxiety, depression, psychosomatic symptoms, like people that have been through the ringer and are kind of burnt out from what Western medicine has to offer them, that they want to look at these other things and they want it to be more natural. So we fall into like the natural fallacy that because this is natural and tribal and that's how we're rooted, that it should be beneficial for me. So like the reason I bring that up though is that there's enough people interested in ayahuasca that it is being researched, that it is being done and trying to be more evaluated to see like, is this a worthwhile, right? Because I know like we talk a lot about traditional healthcare and the flaws with that, but what we're talking about with that is the system. And like the research, the true scientific research is not, it's part of that system, but it's not the system. So if something that's done in the East is being touted to have benefits, the technology of the West will study it to identify, are these true benefits? Or is this more of the thought process, more of like a placebo that is creating this? And if it's an alternative method that now has science behind it showing that it is effective, it's no longer an alternative method, it is a method. If it remains an alternative method, it's because it hasn't been researched yet. And it may not be researched yet because it's not worth researching, because the theory and the efficacy is just not there, and it's not worth pouring resources into it to be established. Or two, that it's newer in the research. Like they're starting the groundwork of it, but more has to come out. Whenever you start the groundwork of research, what tends to happen is you show all the positive benefits of it. Then what happens is more established methodology comes along. It now looks at it and says, yeah, it wasn't as effective as we thought it was. The research just wasn't done appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where we're at with ayahuasca, with anxiety, depression. People say, well, there's research on this that's showing this. There is. There's research showing the positive benefits of this helping with high level anxiety, helping with depression, like really promising results. Like it's looking great. It's very fresh in the Western research. Eastern, it's not fresh. It's been done for years. But again, we have to look at it just because it's been done for years and is shown in this population with cultural beliefs and societal norms that this is happening. Like, is that going to happen in a different population? And is it actually doing it for that reason, or is it the other things that are surrounding it?
In that newer research, is it that they're taking ayahuasca as an ayahuasca ceremony and therefore it's helping the anxiety and depression, or is it just like them drinking the ayahuasca and it's helping the anxiety and depression? Because those are two different things.
Those
the
are
ceremony versus just drinking it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the research is at right now, is that they're looking at this and saying, hey, it's beneficial, but is it beneficial because of the ceremony, or is it beneficial because of this? And you know, there is a systemic effect that happens from taking ayahuasca, from taking DMT, like that the psychoactive drug that is in ayahuasca. Like there is an effect that happens in the nervous system when you take that, and that effect is real. But are the benefits from that substance, or are the benefits from all the things surrounding that, right? So like for fun, how would we set that up as a researcher, right? And like I read research, I'm involved in research, but I'm not a researcher.
Yeah.
So if you're setting up the study design, you have to look at this and say, all right, if we want to rule out, is it the ceremony or not the ceremony that's doing this, you have to have a group that has similar diagnoses. They go through similar ceremonies. One group drinks the actual ayahuasca, the other group drinks the placebo ayahuasca, one that looks like the actual beverage, and like the person delivering it doesn't know that it's a sham ayahuasca, and the person drinking it doesn't know that it's a sham, and the person evaluating that group doesn't know which one they had. So they're strictly just looking at what are the results of this. And then you would look at it and look at those results and say, if the placebo group, the fake ayahuasca drink, had the same outcome as the true drugged ayahuasca drink. Drugged ayahuasca, it's like ATM machine. It's like the ayahuasca is the drug. So we don't. But anyway, they would look at that and say, if the ceremony with the placebo and the ceremony with the ayahuasca created the same result, then we can start to say it was more of the ceremony itself, the community aspect, than it was just that. Then we'd be able to start looking at more independently and saying, okay, let's get rid of the ceremony and let's just have someone drink the ayahuasca and someone drink the placebo and see what the effect is from that. So now it's doubling down on that. And that's what research will do, is it will start looking and saying, what are the factors that are leading to the outcome? And maybe the ayahuasca does show that, like, on its own, that compound or that beverage does create this positive effect and the other things aren't needed behind it. If that is the case, like people will look at it and like, well, would it ever be accepted? Yeah, like we want to talk about big pharma and like the wellness industry and making money, like, yeah, like anxiety, depression is a really high condition. And if there can be controlled ayahuasca that's being delivered to people in a controlled setting that they can make money off of, why would they not venture into that from a capitalistic standpoint? Because I know the biggest argument with this is like that Eastern versus Western, and like would it be accepted because of big pharma and money and things like that? And it's like, no, we have to better understand the system and then the research that allows alternative methods to be better discovered and distributed. Because the biggest thing is like, if that was to be the case, well, the FDA has to make ayahuasca non-illegal because of the drug that's in it and make it for medical purposes. And for that to happen, there has to be research that has shown time and time again that it is worthwhile of doing. So that's my one thought.
Yeah. And the reality is, in all of what you just said, is that like there's not enough research yet for that. And so it's like, all right, cool, but right now, like, we're gonna wait and see like what the research actually is going to show, because there's not enough, and it might be being done currently, but it hasn't been published yet, so we're just not sure.
Right. And my other thought on this, that's kind of the like, I don't know, setting the risers on the stage, I guess.
Yeah.
But my thought with this is like like with what we do at Hope Not Nope, I'm sorry, I cannot sit here and advocate for you to go use a drug to discover who you are.
No, not at all.
And like I get that like maybe you get to a point in your life where there's too many stressors and too many distractors that you've lost the maturity or discipline to filter those out, to remind yourself of who you are again. But I'm sitting here like, why let it get to that point? And the reason that happens is we've talked about this before, but it's the focus on the body and not addressing the mind and the spirit. Like before you reach this level, this pinnacle level of an athlete, like somewhere along the line, someone needs to ask you, who are you? What are your core values? And are you living those out? And if that doesn't happen, all of a sudden you get all this publicity and you get all this pressure. And now you have to discover who you are with all these cameras in your face. Like this needs to happen way before that that aspect happens. And so, you know, Dom asking about ayahuasca, I think a lot of people are curious about it because, hey, we see a pro athlete do this thing. And so like, should I be doing that? And I don't know the level of athlete that Dom is, but I think he's a great athlete because he's curious and he's asking questions. But Dom, there's so many things that you can do before you need to consider an ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica or South America. And again, I'm not saying that there's not an effect from it. Like we don't know that yet. I'm just saying that I don't want our athletes to get to a point that they have to use a psychoactive drug to understand who they are as a person and how God created them to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I've noticed is when we work with athletes that they're rooted in their faith, regardless of what their faith is. But if they're rooted in their faith, they know who they are. They know that they want to win the game, competition, the tournament, whatever it may be. Like they want to win that and they're driven to win that. But if they don't win that, it's not a big issue. It's like, I wanted to win, but it doesn't like, I'm not crushed as a person spiritually because that didn't happen, because I know that, yes, I'm an athlete, but I am a God-centered athlete. And that's a whole different aspect. And I think a lot of people athletes, I'll say, that are going to ayahuasca ceremonies, they're spiritual in the sense of like a spiritual practice, but they're not rooted in faith. And I think that can be a dangerous place for athletes to be in.
I also want to mention like being grounded in who you are in your faith is so important for every person listening to this. And I guess the desire of a ayahuasca ceremony, like I just want to look at the word ceremony, okay? As an athlete, you have the opportunity to have other quote unquote ceremonies for the most part. I think of when a team does a team retreat. I know not every team does this, but I've seen team retreats before where they all get together, they get an Airbnb or a Verbo or whatever, and they're all in this house for a weekend, and there's chats around a campfire, there's team building experiences. Typically, there's something of like, hey, get grounded in who are you type of reflection time. There's different games and whatever. If you're on this retreat as an athlete, the reality is that team that you're with, you've already suffered together. So there's that aspect of the ayahuasca of like, you've already suffered together and now you're experiencing this like camaraderie and this joy. None of that is under the influence of anything other than the truth of who you are. Like you don't need to drink anything or take any sort of supplement to go on this retreat. And I think of for myself, one thing that helped me so much when I was going through my injury was that I leaned on my faith. So much so that like I was in chronic pain for nearly a decade, but like my faith was thriving and I did ministry work for that entire decade thinking that like even if I'm in pain, like I still have this faith that I have. And I've been very fortunate to go on countless retreats that I would argue are incredibly superior to these ayahuasca ceremonies because they're rooted in Christ and they're rooted in who he is. And like that was so essential for me in my journey as a human being.
Yeah.
In general, not just an athlete, but as a human being. And I think like that helped ground me and keep me grounded. But now like that I'm still an athlete and I've reclaimed my athletic being after being in pain for so long and now I am pain free. Like I can still have those experiences. I don't need to pay thousands of dollars to go to Costa Rica to go do this thing that like I can create like within myself and within my community because I have the values and the faith that I do.
Yeah, and I'll say, you know, there's simple ways to do this. And I remember back in playing basketball, one of our team retreats was that we all spent the night in the gym.
Oh, that's cool.
Like you brought your sleeping bag and you slept on the hardwood floor. And it wasn't meant to be like, hey, let's suffer and then wake up and there's joy. It was just like team bonding, right? So like coach brought in his TV from the office, so we had like 2K and Madden going, different games going on, and like ordered a pizza and then locked in the gym. We're all spending the night together, like JV and varsity teams. And it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and guess what comes out? Dodgeballs. Lights off, dodgeball. Like talk about suffering.
Yeah.
But talk about like a bonding experience of waking up the next day and like laughing hysterically and still having that memory of like, man, remember when we were all in the gym and like turn into dodgeball at 1 in the morning and you're sleeping and if you don't know, bam, you get whacked in the face. And guess what? There's no lights, which means there's no lines in dodgeball. Like this was a free fight. There was no teams. As you had a ball,
That's
you run,
awesome.
you find the guy that's sleeping, and you smash him in the face with a dodgeball. Like, good morning. It's middle of the night. How you doing?
That is iconic.
But it was like a fun way to, again, not to like discover who we are, but a fun way to just bond together and have a quote unquote ceremony. The last thing I want to put up here is like, hey, we're talking about quarterbacks, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers. Chiefs fan, sorry, I'm bringing up Patrick Mahomes.
Of course.
Here's a guy that, like him or not, has reached the pinnacle multiple times. Has bunch of eyes on him, paparazzi, has his own security team, all of that. An athlete who is very centered in his faith and very open about his faith and being rooted in that. And, similar accomplishments, different upbringings and stuff like that. But, to my knowledge, I've never heard of Patrick Mahomes saying like, I need to go discover myself through an ayahuasca ceremony in order to be like rooted back into who I am. He knows who he is.
Yeah.
And guess what? He just lost the Super Bowl. They got blown out. I get it. It was a tough game to watch.
Don't bring it up.
But
just kidding.
He's not sitting here going, oh, man, like we lost that game. I lost who I am. I need to go do an ayahuasca ceremony to rediscover who I am spiritually to be able to go to this next season. He's going, hey, I know who I am as a person. I know what I need to do in this off season, and I'm going to do those things, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to play harder and stronger, and be who I'm meant to be from my belief in my creator.
Yeah.
And I look at that, and it's like, yeah, we hear ayahuasca. It's this curious thing. There's this build up to this drink that has psychoactive ingredients in it. There's this whole presentation around it. Like, yeah, there's a lot of bells and whistles. Like, cool. Guess what? Like, after that ceremony, I'd like to see you come back to living in the society that you live in the United States. How long does that last for?
Yeah.
Like, do you have to keep going back for it? Do you go once and then you're taken care of the rest of your life? Do you have to keep going back to it because, hey, that whole ceremony thing that you're doing is not what you're facing every day in life, and now we have to rely on this ceremony and this drug to make you feel better again? That's a dangerous path.
Right.
To me, it's way more powerful when you can find joy and you can find lightness and fulfillment and using the things that you're already equipped with and not needing a drug to do so,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a natural drug or whether it's a synthetic drug created in a pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you need to use those to get yourself to feel a particular way, there's other ways
Mm-hmm.
that you can start to take care of your spirit. Yes, they're harder. Yes, they require a little bit more digging. They require a little bit more discipline, a little bit more work, but it's more fruitful.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up because the last thing I want to say is that at the beginning of this episode, when we were initially explaining the ayahuasca ceremony, you said there's a freedom to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that true freedom is what we're talking about now. That yes, there can feel like a freedom, but then you're not truly free if you need some event and then you go back to reality in real life and you feel chained up again. Like that's not freedom. Freedom is living every single day free. And that's what we're truly talking about. And when you use the tools that God has equipped you with without like yes, God has given the world other things as well,
Mm-hmm.
but like within you, you have the power within you to have this freedom every day of your life.
Yeah.
If you so choose and you so act that way. And so that's the enticing part of this entire thing.
Yeah.
Is like living in true freedom every single day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hope stories?
Hope stories. Kick us off.
Kick us off. Okay. Mine is just simple. We are slowly entering the spring, which means that we get to work out outside again. And we had our first outside workout the other day, and the ground is very muddy, but we were able to bring some weights to the basketball court that we have and did a workout outside in the sun. And I don't even think it was over 60 degrees, but the sun was out and it was nice.
Yeah.
It felt really nice. And so that's my hope story. I really love getting to work out outside and lift and train and shoot hoops and go for runs and not have fire breath from it being so cold. But so that's my hope story.
Yeah, I'm gonna tag right along with that because it wasn't just us being outside, but it was like everyone is left hibernation mode.
Yeah,
and they're out
the
like
neighborhood's coming
walking.
alive.
The like kiddos are back playing. There's like all these different noises in the neighborhood. Like winter, and we live on top of a hill. There's a lot of wind, a lot of snow that comes through. And I'm serious, like it was hibernation mode like this past winter. So it's just nice to see life again.
Yeah.
And if you haven't lived in the Northeast or an area that like goes through these different seasons, it's hard to explain the difference in affect that you see. And like, I'm not going to get into the conversation of seasonal depression and things like that. It's just like people innately love people. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to see people. And the reality is, even if you're sitting inside and you're looking out your window and you see people walking by, it brings you a little sliver of joy.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Like it's not, you're not going out there and starting a neighborhood walk group and stuff like that. Like I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to talk to my neighbors. Like you still get a little bit excited when you see them out there doing yard work or whatever it may be. And it's just so important. And where we live, it's funny because you go through the winter where it's just like, man, it's gritty. You get through it. It's not like Alaska, but like.
But the only people we really saw walking in the winter were people with dogs.
People with
big
dogs.
Big dogs
big
too,
dogs,
like
the huskies.
Yeah. So maybe it is Alaska.
Yeah. So when that weather breaks and it's like 40 degrees and the sun's out, and like people are out just walking, it's like wow, life it's back. The birds are back, the animals are back. It's just like it's an exciting time of the year. It makes you very appreciative of the things that for the season that you're in.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode. One thing that we do have is a gift for you. Dylan mentioned earlier that the ashwagandha or ayahuasca ceremony.
Our gift is ashwagandha. We're doing an ayahuasca ceremony.
No. Just kidding. But one of the things he mentioned, as athletes, it's you often hear the body, mind, spirit, but we really believe that in order to truly thrive, which really this whole episode is talking about, how can you thrive the most? How can you live with freedom? It's not body, mind, spirit. It's spirit, mind, body all together. And I would argue that you need to address the spirit first because it's been the most neglected, especially as an athlete. And so we have a free resource for you in our show notes. We have a beginner's thrive guide. It's just taking those first couple steps to readdressing that spirit, your spirit within again. So hopefully you will click on that little link below and really enjoy it.
Yeah, and Dom, let me put this together and sum it up, and you can tell me if the summary is accurate or if you want to add on or take it away.
Okay.
But here's what is similar between an ayahuasca ceremony and using the free resource of a beginner's thrive guide, or having freedom to, again, why do people want to use an ayahuasca ceremony? Because they want to bridge this gap between who they are and who they were meant to be. They want to dive into their spiritual being and this rediscover that aspect of them. So what's the similarity between these things? It's not drugs. It's time and commitment to do that. You know, if you're going to an ayahuasca ceremony, there's a time and travel commitment that you're disciplined to doing that. Guess what? You don't need that. You know, like, yes, it's an option, but I'll say, like, you don't need that. Like, if we had an athlete that asked us, hey, should I do this or is there other things? I would 100% say there are other things. If you like feel like you need to do that, and that's part of your value system that you've already established, and that's like, okay, cool, like go do that, but you may not be a good fit for us to work together if that's the method that you want to continuously pursue. So like with the beginner's thrive guide, with an ayahuasca ceremony, you have to have the time committed to work on these things. Like that's the biggest thing to bridge the gap between who you currently are and who you were meant to be, is taking the time to sit and ask these questions and spend time in thought. And it takes commitment, it takes discipline to do that. And so like it may be a shortcut to doing it. It still takes time, it still takes commitment. So why not do it in a way that can give you freedom and not have you relying on a psychoactive drug to get there? Fair?
Fair.
Cool.
And I would argue that the ayahuasca ceremony takes a lot more time than the beginner's thrive guide.
I would agree.
And so the beginner's thrive guide, it's not a 2-week trip to Costa Rica. It's
and
2 or 3 pages.
And hey, if you're going on vacation and you have like, you know that, oh my gosh, I'm finally getting some downtime. Like I have time where I don't have all the responsibilities I have in my normal day. One, maybe look at those responsibilities and see if there are things you can start to delegate. Two, use the Thrive Guide on vacation.
Yeah.
Beautiful, like sitting on the beach and near the pool. It's a bunch of reflective questions. They're deeper questions. They're fun. Like they're fun to. There are a lot of questions that you don't ask yourself or get asked when you're going through life. They're questions that get brought up to you when you want to be intentional about how you want to go through your life.
Yeah.
And what a great time to do that on vacation. Like, let's replace that ayahuasca with a Thrive Guide. Sit down poolside, beachside, wherever, and just work through it. So
yeah,
that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. Have a great week. And remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful, but an opportunity to become hope.
The Hope Not Know podcast is meant for educational, informational, and personal development purposes only and does not constitute any health or medical advice. If you're looking for specific advice, connect with us to work with a Hope coach. The Hope Not Know podcast shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions in this podcast.